You're muted, Maharaj.
Sarvabhauma Prabhu had invited me to sing the Damodar Astakam, but I find it very impractical to do on Zoom because the different speeds of the internet, you can't follow properly. So I would say, just do it there in Houston and I'll have to do it here. If I were there, I would love to do it. But so let us go to today's verse.
Maharaj, would you like to share your screen or do you want me to pull the verse up?
Well, I have it here, but you could also put it up for everybody else. I'm just trying to free up. There it goes. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we'll be discussing first canto, second chapter, text number 13. I just wanted to review a little bit to understand the jump, because it's also been a few weeks since we covered the last verse. It's not like it was yesterday. So I just wanted to go back, take 5 minutes to go back over the previous verses from where I started, and actually one verse from before I started. I began this series of lectures from 129, which begins to discuss that life, dharmasya apavargyasya, that dharma should be for the purpose of liberation. But the previous verse to that is a very famous verse from the Bhagavatam, and it's related. It's like the verse we're doing today is a continuation of verse number 8. So therefore I wanted to go back. Dharma svanushtita pumsam vishvaksena katasu va notpadayad yadiratim shrama evehi kevalam. That even though you may do all of your duties perfectly according to the Vedic prescriptions, if there's no direct service or there's no love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, no attraction to glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then it's a waste of time. So then that was describing that we should worship and hear and feel an attraction for the message of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then we went into verse 9, which speaks about purpose of life is for liberation. This place after liberation, but inevitably we have to earn something. But the purpose of our earnings is not for sense gratification. And then the Bhagavatam says, kamasya nindriya pritir. The purpose of sense gratification is not to enjoy the senses, but to preserve the body. The real purpose of life, jivasya tattva jigyasya, is to practice self-realization. Then we went to verse 11, which tells us the different categories of self-realization. Vadanti hit tattva vidas, tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmati paramatmati bhagavaniti shabhyate. It says that the absolute truth manifests in 3 forms: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, or Krishna. And then the next verse was that you may cultivate, and a serious student should cultivate knowledge and renunciation, equipped with knowledge and renunciation, which actually come from the practice of bhakti. Otherwise, our renunciation that we practice, where does it come from? Srila Prabhupada said, chant minimum 16 rounds, follow these 4 regulative principles. that is knowledge and renunciation. And so knowledge and renunciation to progress in devotional service, and it says in that verse, Bhakta Shuddha Grihiyate, that, or Grihitaya, that it's all for the purpose of bhakti. So then we get to the verse that we're considering today. And so I'll read the verse and then try to tie that little progression in. Atapum vir dvija shreshta varnasrama vibhagashaha swanustitasya dharmasha samsirir haritoshanam. So, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O best of the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation, according to caste divisions and orders of life, is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So before we go into the purport, I just want to tie that in. So we understood that if one doesn't try to glorify and please Krishna, it's a waste of time. Then so not to waste time in that pursuit, one should try for not be bewildered by the fact that we earn money and the senses want to be pleased, but that sense pleasure is for the preservation of the body, keep the body and the soul together. Shouldn't go much beyond that. Of course, it will inevitably, but we should keep it to a minimum. And then, and whatever our duty may be, the objective, as it says here, is to please Krishna. So now let us read the purport of Srila Prabhupada. Human society all over the world is divided into 4 castes and 4 orders of life. The 4 castes are the intelligent caste, the martial caste, the productive caste, and the laborer caste. These castes are classified in terms of one's work and qualification and not by birth. Om Jnana Timirandasya Ganang Jana Sharakaya Chakshurum Militam Nina Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadat Mahyam Darati Shvapadantikam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Dinavani. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadishatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Garadha Shri Bhashari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I stopped here in the purport because this point is made again and again and is outlined, is especially emphasized by Narada Muni in chapter 14 of the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, where Narada Muni says, it is not by birth, but it is by qualification. That qualification can come from previous births, or that qualification can come from qualifying ourselves in this verse. Otherwise, by our past activities, we act in a responsible, dutiful way. Because this verse is speaking of duty. And I'll go into that after we finish the purport. Then again, there are 4 orders of life, namely student life, householder life, retired, and devotional life. So we see, as far as the 4 orders, it is a choice. But sometimes, especially in what evolved or devolved into the caste system in India, became just the understanding that it's by birth. You know? So just as the orders of life are by birth, the castes are by birth. In the best interests of human society, there must be such divisions of life. Otherwise, no social institution can grow in a healthy state. In each and every one of the above mentioned divisions of life, the aim must be to please the supreme authority of the personality of Godhead. Now, here we have something very special by Srila Prabhupada. First of all, let me go back. It says, no social institution can grow in a healthy state. Now, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that because of human necessities, otherwise, because of being in this body, there are four necessities, which is social interaction, health, family, and psychological well-being. These four things should be there, and to have a healthy. So otherwise, the varnashram system, or really we're talking about the Daivi varnashram system, because ordinary varnashram has already been ruled out in the 8th verse. So then it says the aim, now we should listen to this language, the aim must be to please the supreme authority of the personality of Godhead. So it's not like pleasing Krishna like the gopis please Krishna. Otherwise, this is being, Prabhupada wrote this for us. It's not, the gopis please Krishna by whatever they do. But we don't necessarily please Krishna by whatever we do. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes here to please the supreme authority. Otherwise, you please Krishna, Dharman husti sakshat bhagavat pranitam, as it says, Yamaraj said to his followers, that Dharma means to follow the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So please, we must first please Krishna by following him. Therefore, the way to please Krishna in the beginning of devotional service, follow the injunctions of Bhagavad Gita, follow the injunctions of the first canto, this canto. And that's why the first canto is so important. And then the second canto, they are the basis for progress in Krishna consciousness. If you don't really understand them, or you don't hear from them, you don't have the proper basis, and then we can fall into sentimentality or sahaja, the sahaja mentality. So this institutional function of human society is known as the system of varnashram dharma, which is quite natural for civilized life. The varnashram institution is constructed to enable one to realize the absolute truth. So we see this, the purpose, just like Krishna says, and later on, later in Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, Vedaishta Sarvairahame Vavedyo. The whole purpose of the Vedas is to understand me, Vedanta Krid Eva Vedanta Krid Eva Vid Eva Chaham. Because I am the compiler of the Vedas, I'm a compiler of Vedanta and the knower of the Vedas. So therefore, it's all meant to understand Krishna, realize the absolute truth. It is not for artificial domination of one division over another. So here Srila Prabhupada is ruling out the possibility, because Srila Prabhupada uses the language of castes, and the idea of the caste system, is very, it's just like if you mention Holocaust to people of Jewish faith, then they become disturbed. So also people in general become disturbed speaking about the caste system, which was a system to dominate one. The Brahmins would take advantage of their knowledge to exploit others. The Kshatriyas they used their force to exploit others. And the Vaishyas, even up to today, use their monetary, even the Bhagavatam in the 12th canto says that justice will be had by how much money one possesses. So the Vaishyas, they control. And the Shudras become rebellious because they're being exploited so much. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada makes this distinction. It is not for artificial domination. And of course, the word artificial is very important. because there is dominion. There is dominion. The Brahmins do have dominion over the Kshatriyas, but it is a voluntary dominion. The Kshatriyas understand their duty is to follow the Brahmins. And the Vaishyas understand the Kshatriyas are looking out for our welfare, just like Ramachandra, who went into his kingdom and through spies and himself in disguise, heard criticisms of himself, which led him to exile Sita to Valmiki Muni's ashram. So this is, this is something very, very something that, there is dominion, but it should not be artificial. It should be real. It should be done out of respect. We respect the Brahmins because they're renounced, because they're knowledgeable, because they're kind, because they're merciful. And the Kshatriyas because they're protective. They give security to the people. The people are happy to feel secure. The Vaishyas because they provide for everyone. And the Shudras because they're working hard. So they even have a certain type of dominion over others, or dominance or dominion. So they have it over others because their work is invaluable. Without them plowing the fields and doing so many things like that, society would not exist. When the aim of life, that is realization of the absolute truth, is missed by too much attachment for indriya priti, or sense gratification, as already discussed here before, the institution of the varnashram is utilized by selfish men to pose an artificial predominance over the weaker section. So this is something that we see in modern society. The use of alcohol, intoxicating substances, so much emphasis and so much facility and technology given to sense gratification, that advanced sense gratification, or Srila Prabhupada puts it here, indriya priti. Just like in the Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj said, indriya pritaya, that nunam pramata, nunam pramata, those who are insanely addicted to kurute vikarma, or sinful activity, yad indriya pritaya aprinoti, that indriya pritaya, this indriya pritaya is very, very strong. So when the whole society is dedicated to increase indriya priti, or sense gratification, and that's been discussed before, we just reviewed it, that when the kamasya nendriya pritir, what is the purpose of this sense gratification? The purpose is that labho jivasya yadata. The purpose is to preserve life, not to enjoy unlimitedly. So this is a very important point. Then it makes it very easy. So therefore, prostitution, gambling, intoxication, all these things are meant to entangle people in sense gratification so they can be easily dominated. And so Srila Prabhupada said this artificial predominance is already current. But the saner section of people know it well, that the divisions of castes and orders of life are meant for smooth social intercourse and high thinking self-realization, and not for any other purpose. Here in the statement of the Bhagavatam is that the highest aim of life, or the highest perfection of the institution of the varnashram dharma, is to cooperate jointly for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4:13. So Krishna begins from Bhagavad Gita 4:13. Chaturvarnam maya shishtam guna karma vibhagashaha. He says, I have created this. This is something that is meant for you, but it is meant for you to achieve self-realization. And tasya kartaram apimam. It's not something that I need, something that I created for myself. Vidya kartaram avyayam. I am imperishable. Krishna says, I am perfect. I don't need some system for myself. I've created this system for you. And you should understand that I have nothing to do with this. It's for you, not for me. So this is something that's very, very important that Krishna emphasizes. And so here we come to, if we look at this actual verse, what we're talking about here, the varnashram duties. So duties, there's different types of duties. There's karmic duties. Now, what does Krishna say about karmic duties? No, Krishna says that these karmic duties are, they're automatically achieved by, and just computer's giving me a little trouble today. It's really old. So, but this is all achieved by, as Krishna says, karmanya badikaraste. Krishna says that this is ultimately achieved by one actually performing one's duty. One has the right adhikaras. But not only do you have the right, you should perform your duty. But mapalashu kadachana. But one should not be attached to the fruits of that activity. That's very difficult. Otherwise, to really be a dutiful person, you must do your duty, but you must not be attached to the results of that duty. And makarma palahetur bhur. And one should not think that I am causing the results. When later in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna discusses the factors of action. The last factor is the result is caused by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Paramatma within the heart. So, and also Matu Sangha, because one may think, I should do my duty. I can't enjoy the results. I can't even think that I created the results. So better, forget about this duty. Mate Sangos Prakarmani. One must not be attached to not doing one's duty. So Krishna consciousness is very dutiful. It's very dutiful. And we should learn how to perform devotional service in a dutiful way. And otherwise, that we become bewildered. We become bewildered in our performance of our activities. We become bewildered in everything. So we have to do our duty. Now, if we refer to this month, the Damodar Leela, everyone is very dutiful. Actually, in the beginning of the Damodar Leela, what is happening? Mother Yashoda is churning the butter. And she's churning the butter, and at the same time, she's boiling milk. She's churning the butter to give Krishna very wonderful, churning the yogurt to get very wonderful butter. And she wants to give that butter to Krishna. She doesn't want him to go to anyone else's house. And also she has gathered, she asked Nanda Maharaj to bring the milk from certain cows. There are certain cows who eat certain types of grasses. They only eat that type of grass. And those cows will provide the best quality milk. Therefore, Krishna will never go away. Krishna will never go to anyone else's house. Mother Yashoda doesn't want Krishna to ever leave her house. She's so dutiful. She's so attached. So then Krishna cries. What does Mother Yashoda do? Immediately, her duty, she goes to feed Krishna. At the same time, she's doing what this verse says. Haritoshanam, pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. She leaves her prescribed duty. She gives precedence to the supreme duty of giving Krishna pleasure. And then what happens? The milk begins to boil over. And one of our acharyas, named Chitsuk, not Chitsugananda Prabhu, but Chitsuk, a very old commentator on the Bhagavatam, he said that the milk actually was feeling ecstasy in Krishna's presence, and therefore wanted to rise up to the edge of the pot to see what Krishna was doing. So because in the spiritual world, and of course, Boma Vrindavan or Goloka Vrindavan, they're both the spiritual world. So therefore, everything is alive. Everything is Chintamani. So the milk is also, the milk wants to touch Krishna's lotus feet. And the only way the milk can do that is to boil over and flow into Krishna's direction. So she's very dutiful. Even our acharyas, Srila Prabhupada comments, and the acharyas also comment that, was this not a dereliction of duty on the part of Mother Yashoda? Would this not be in violation of this particular verse where Mother Yashoda is, Krishna wants her milk, he's the supreme person. Why does she put him down? And as a result, he becomes angry and goes to take care of the milk, because that milk is only for pleasing Krishna. She has taken so much trouble to make sure that Krishna will never be disappointed with the milk and the yogurt and the butter that he gets in Nanda Maharaja's house. Very dutiful. She's very dutiful. And Krishna is also very dutiful. He says in the 10th, I believe it's 10:10:25. I'm just going to look here real quick. That Krishna says, although these two young men are the sons of the very rich Kuvera, and I have nothing to do with them. In saying that, he says, they were rascals. No, they disrespected my devotee. Devarshi Narada is my very dear and affectionate devotee. And therefore, because he wanted me to come face to face with them, I must do so for their deliverance. This is Krishna. This is the person that we follow. Krishna is dutiful. Mother Yashoda is dutiful. Nanda Maharaj, they're teaching us duty, but that duty, as this verse is emphasizing, is totally dedicated to pleasing Krishna. To the point where the gopis, they want to please Krishna. The gopis want to please Krishna by embracing him with their glance, and the blinking of their eyelids is a disturbance. Everything is pleasing Krishna. Actually, what was it, about 10, 12 years ago, there was two devotees who were very studious, but they were a little bit of rascal mentality. So not like Krishna. Krishna can be a rascal and is transcendental, but we cannot be rascals. So they were saying, Maharaj, you say that the gopis are, they're free from any, any desire, personal desire, but they're wanting Krishna to be with them. They're wanting to see Krishna's beauty. So therefore, we have concluded that, they also are motivated by their own pleasure. And I told them, no. In dressing very nicely, even in what seems to be that they want some pleasure for themselves, it is only because Krishna wants to do that. And Yogamaya, knowing Krishna's desire, he puts the gopis and the gopas and the cow and every one of the living entities in Goloka Vrindavan, Yogamaya puts them into situations, just like the cows are licking the body of Krishna. No. So does that mean that they are just looking for sense gratification? No, because Krishna enjoys giving that pleasure to the cows. Krishna is known as Govinda, the giver of pleasure to the cows. And he wants the cows to have that pleasure. And therefore it's pleasing him that they are pleased. They only accept pleasure if it will ultimately result in pleasing Krishna. So it's such an advanced stage of consciousness we see in the Bhagavatam. So everything, everyone's duty later on in this particular canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a famous verse spoken by Narada Muni where he said, Idam hipum sam tapasa shutasya va shrishtasya suktasya cha buddhi datayo avichutor ta kavibir nirupito yarutama shloka gunanu varnana. He says that within all the activities that we find in human society, austerities, studying the Vedas, performing one's duties, getting educated, and acquiring intelligence, the infallible purpose of all these things is, an intelligent person knows that the infallible purpose is to please Uttama Shloka, to please that person who is pleased by the highest degree of quality service. And this is why a devotee sometimes, it seems like they are, they require some certain type of mood or certain type of advancement. Sometimes there's a conflict within our movement that those who are very dutiful to preserving the movement, they feel that everyone should just be concentrated on their service. And other senior devotees, they have the mood that let me somehow or another become more learned, more transcendental, and therefore I can give more to others. So both are in the mood of service, but they're different moods of service. So we see that the infallible purpose of everything, according to Narada Muni, is to just glorify the Supreme Personality of God. And by glorifying him, we become happy. Because we're always, Srila Prabhupada makes this point, we're always glorifying someone or something. You know, he makes that point, especially, I think it was the 5th verse of the 1st chapter. Maybe it was the 5th verse of this chapter. And just look back there very quickly. Yeah, this chapter. So, and that particular verse, which is a famous verse, Muneo sarupishto ham bhavadbir loka mangalam yat krita Krishna sambrasho yanatma supasidati. That one should ask questions. So those questions are very wonderful because they're concerning Krishna, and it will bring the greatest pleasure to the soul and the greatest pleasure to the Supreme Personality of God. So Krishna asking us to glorify him, according to Sutta Goswami, is actually a way that we ourselves become pleased. So then we've spoken about duty on the level of karma. But what about duty on the level of jnana? So Lord Brahma, in his prayers, there's one famous verse, Shreya Shrutim Bhaktim Udasyate Vibo, that when a person has somehow or another given up the process of bhakti, Kushanti Kevala Bodha Labdaye, and tried to simply acquire some great knowledge or some position or some through so many studies and austerities. And what is the result? The result is that the result is a great amount of trouble. And Krishna also says this in 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 5th verse, that this process of trying to ascend to the Supreme is very difficult for the embodied soul. Because when we're within these material bodies, even if we just want to please Krishna or satisfy Krishna, even if we just want to do that, it's difficult. Prahlad Maharaj outlined this. He said, from 1 to 5 years old, you just waste time playing. Then from 5 to 9, so much disciplines. Then from 9 to 16, you have to study. And then, you have to engage in all kinds of studies. And then one gets married and family life and so many demands and work. So how much time do you have? You have to spend so many hours for eating, so many hours for sleeping, so many hours for working, so much time in youth. And then in old age, one becomes invalid. So how much time do we have for self-realization? Prahlad Maharaj says, take advantage of it because it's not that much time. So what to speak of someone who's simply trying to acquire knowledge about the energy of the Lord without understanding of the Lord himself. Nanyad yata stula tusha vigatinam. It's just like beating the husks of rice or grain. Or just like if you take the wheat out of the husk, or say previously they would do that in India, they would beat it, or maybe everywhere. They would beat the grains with sticks and the husk would fall off. But after you take away the grains, you don't want to beat the husks. There's no benefit. So to acquire knowledge, simply for the objective of sense gratification, it's not very beneficial. So this was, that was Lord Brahma's prayer. Of course, in his next prayer, he makes another prayer, and in his next prayer, he says that but if one engages in devotional service, one can have all of these activities, that one is attracted to, and there's no problem because one is using everything in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So later on, in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, it addresses another concern. And what that concern is that why do you there's so much, just like we read in the previous verse, Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya. One should be equipped with Jnana and Vairagya. But in previous verse, I think it's verse number 8 of this chapter, Krishna says that Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojataha Jnanayat Yasya Vairagyam Jnanam Chayha Daham Tukam. He says that there's no need to cultivate these things independently because they will automatically come from devotional service. So therefore, Krishna says in the 11th canto of Bhagavatam, 20th chapter, I think text number 31, Tasmat Mad Bhakti Yuktasya. Once we are engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Yogino Va Madatmanaha, practicing that bhakti yoga with intensity, with great determination and perseverance. Nagyanam nachaya vairagyam prayashvayo na bhaved iha. That when one does this, the cultivation and knowledge of renunciation is generally not the means of achieving the highest perfection in this world. Otherwise, one should simply try to serve Krishna. And in the next two verses, Krishna emphasizes everything that can be achieved by fruitive activities, penance, knowledge, detachment, mystic yoga, charity, religious duties, and all other means of perfecting life is easily achieved by my devotee through loving service to me. If somehow or another my devotee desires promotion to heaven, liberation, or residence in my abode, he easily achieves such benedictions. So there's a warning. There was a warning in the fifth canto, I'm sorry, where Krishna says that by performing devotional service, one can achieve all these things, but one will not achieve the highest perfection by which I come under their control. Because how can I be under the control of someone who's self-motivated? So in the next verse, Krishna clarifies a little more. Because my devotees possess saintly behavior and deep intelligence, they completely dedicate themselves to me and do not desire anything besides me. Just like Sunday will be Ekadashi. So Ekadashi is an important thing to follow. We must follow Ekadashi. And so there's one statement in Chaitanya Bhagavat that says, if one breaks Ekadashi in Vaikuntha, one can fall to the material world. Now, first of all, especially maybe in Vaikuntha, there's some semblance of Ekadashi, but in Goloka Vrindavan, there's no Ekadashi. Or they may somehow or another follow it. But the statement is made, it says that a devotee can fall down from Vaikuntha. But then later on it says, although he will never do so. No. Otherwise, saying that we should avoid committing any activity that is counterproductive to devotional service. But here it says, even if someone, he can achieve these things, promotion to heaven, liberation. It says, my devotee will not desire anything besides me. Indeed, even if I offer them liberation from birth or death, they do not accept it. We have the example, several examples. The example of Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj, Nrsimhadev, after hearing his beautiful prayers, he said, my dear Prahlad, what do you want? And Prahlad said, my dear Lord, I'm not here to do business with you. I'm not here to I gave you some service, I offered you some prayers, now you please, here's my list. As I say many times, Krishna, Nrsimhadev, Vishnu, they're not Santa Claus. He's not there to satisfy our whims. He is there to please us, to give us pleasure and to receive our service. That is Krishna, is what Rama means, the giver of pleasure. He wants to give us unlimited transcendental pleasure. And so he can't always do that if we're not properly situated. And therefore, Krishna wants us to be properly situated. So, so the point is that even though those things can be achieved by devotional service, a real devotee, a sincere devotee, will never desire them, will never, never, ever desire such things. Because a devotee wants to please Krishna. So I wanted to conclude with two other quotes from the same chapter. Well, one quote from that chapter, another quote, to just conclude what this first quote is a very famous quote. Krishna is speaking to, Krishna just finished describing a devotional service. And after that, Uddhava, he asked Krishna that what happens if someone is not on that platform? And Krishna says, Tavat karmani kurvita na nividyata yavata mad kata shavanadashu vashada yavan nachayate. As long as one is not satiated by fruitive activity, otherwise you still have some desires in this world, and has not awakened his taste for devotional service by Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, one has to act according to the regulative principles of the Vedic injunctions. That's Bhagavatam 11:29. So the point is, if we feel such an attraction to sense gratification, and we're not, if we feel that attraction, it will be very difficult to please Krishna, as it says here, that samsiddhim haritoshanam. We want to please Krishna, but we may not be pleasing Krishna if we're attached to fruitive activity. And even if we're attached to Dharma, just like in the Vedas, there are many prescriptions of Dharma. You must do this, you must do that, you must do this. And as many times in India, I've been preaching to people and they say, yes, but I have to take care of my family and I have to do this and I have to do that. And, then I can take up devotional service. But devotional service, as Krishna says, Krishna says that we should give up all these dharmas, all these interferences, that these things can interfere with our devotional service. Even though they may be dharmas, we have dharma, we have kula dharma, street dharma, all these dharmas for the family, to protect our children and our wives or husbands and mothers and fathers, so many duties. But all these duties are subservient. Just like in the Padma Purana, it says, Shmartavyo Satatam Vishnu Vismatavyo Najatuchit, that one should always remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead and never forget Him. So I always say, what does that mean? To always remember Krishna, you must chant His holy name. And to never forget Him, you must follow the four regulated principles. And then it goes on to say, of all dharmas, of all karmas, of all duties, these two are the most important. If there's any duty in our life that takes us away from these principles or takes us away from remembering Krishna and glorifying Krishna, we should understand this is an interference. We have to learn to do all these things, just like Lord Brahma preached to Priyavrata. He said, you should do these things. He said, Vishaya Taranga. Vishaya Taranga means the waves of sense gratification. Even though the waves of sense gratification are included in ordinary life, if you remain fixed in devotional service, you will never be deviated from devotional life. So that's what Krishna is saying here. But if you have an attraction for these things, you must follow the rules and regulations. If you don't have a taste for devotional service, a taste for devotional service doesn't mean that I'd like to do this for Krishna, but I don't like to do that. A taste for devotional service means anything that Krishna requires of us, although we may have some things that we're inclined to do more than others, we will please Krishna by what He wants. Going back to what Prabhupada said in the purport. Prabhupada said in his purport, which I emphasized, to please the supreme authority of the personality of Godhead. So, and then Krishna says in another part of the Bhagavatam, and this will be my concluding remark, Agyayaivam gunadosha mayajishtam apiswakam dharmam satyajya yasarvan madbachita satu satama. Having taken complete shelter of my lotus feet, however, a saintly person ultimately renounces such ordinary religious duties and worships me alone. He is thus considered to be the best among all living entities. In other words, Krishna is saying there, if you really have developed your devotional service properly, you will come to the stage where devotional service is everything to you and nothing else matters. Even all these duties, you will perform them, but you will perform them just like we perform so many bodily functions. Sometimes I use the example of going to the bathroom. we perform that. It's not what we want to do. It's not the goal of our life. It's not that today I'm so fortunate I'll be able to go to the bathroom probably 3 or 4 times. Such a wonder. No, it's something we have to do. So when one becomes so attached to Krishna that one cannot do or think of anything other than serving Krishna and pleasing Krishna, then even the most pleasing, wonderful, enjoyable, social and familial and community activities will be insignificant. It's not that they're insignificant, but they will be included in our bhakti. Otherwise, playing with our children, we'll think these children are devotees of Krishna. Therefore, even when playing with them, I see them as servants of the Lord. And therefore, every example, even how I play, there should be some remembrance of Krishna. Just as Jiva Goswami wrote his grammar, all based on the names of Krishna. His whole grammar book is based on the names of Krishna to learn Sanskrit grammar. So every activity which is so dear to everyone in this world becomes insignificant, meaning that to have significance, it has to be included in my bhakti. It has to be included in my devotional service. I cannot do anything which will not serve Krishna. When we come to that platform, we can consider that I'm having some success in my spiritual life. So these are some points on this particular verse. And now I'll stop here. Are there any questions? And you can write it in the chat. You can raise your hand. Or you can, I guess those are the 2 options right now. What was that verse again? Oh, someone's acting. The verse we're considering or the one I just quoted? And someone put here that the verse of today was 1, 2, 13. The verse you started with, yeah, that's quoted here in the chat. 1, 2, 13. These verses, this particular chapter, the 2nd chapter, which is why I chose this, is one of the most important chapters in the whole Bhagavatam. It sets the stage for entering into the Bhagavatam. It's a very, very important chapter, and that's why I'm taking the time to go through it verse after verse after verse and trying to quote different shastra and different things and compare it to, like, I tried to compare it a little bit to Damodar Leela, which is what we're celebrating this month in the month of Damodar. And so very, very, I would advise everyone to study this chapter again and again and again. Anyone else have a question, comment? Yes, Jitamrita Pramodini.
Okay, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Gurudev. What I want to find out is that I have seen this in very common amongst family members. Like, they believe in only, like, you need to take a lot of education academically. You need to take education to work, to live. That is like reality for them. So like devotional life, they say, yeah, we could, go have spiritual life, but our main goal is to work hard and live the reality.
Work hard and what, I'm sorry?
And live the reality. This is how the world runs, So how can I explain this to them in a nice way?
Well, you have to ask them if they're happy 24 hours a day. No. Otherwise, work hard and live the reality of life. You can say that about a frog. Otherwise, you can say that about a lizard. They're working very hard, chasing insects, and that's the reality of their life. But are we going to emulate their lifestyle? Simply working hard, practically speaking, every species of life is forced to work hard. And the human being has a desire to play and to enjoy life because the soul is Satchit Ananda. We crave Ananda, we crave pleasure, but we're becoming satisfied with the greatest pleasure that we can find, which is a poor quality pleasure. Otherwise, the pleasure you find in this world is low grade, low quality. Just like made in China, it's like, or, first it used to be made in Japan, then made in Taiwan, and, made in China or made in Philippines. Otherwise, the sense gratification, what's being offered to us as a compensation for our hard work or for the reality of life. It's easier for someone to say that. What if you're born in Beirut, or you're born in some place where you're, even in the ghettos of New York City or Detroit or some other big city or any place. You're born in a very poor family, poor neighborhood with disease. Are you going to apply that? How can you apply it? So because we want to be happy 24 hours a day, we should try to achieve that happiness, try to achieve that goal and understand the proper way to achieve it. It's not by hard work, although devotees, Srila Prabhupada said devotees are the hardest working people because they're engaged 24 hours a day. When a devotee gets up, they start working. We start chanting the holy name. We bathe this body. We take care, not like some sense gratification. We do it out of duty. This is Krishna's property. This body, I have to take care of it. And then we begin to chant the holy name and we prepare something for the deity. So it's responsible. And as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, if you don't do that, you're a thief. Because this is not your property. This is not your body. Even the government says it's not your body. They say it belongs to us. If you want to leave this country, you have to have a passport. If you want to enter another country, you have to have a passport. You have a number. You have to follow the laws. You have to pay taxes. So the government claims ownership over your life. And if you don't obey the rules of their ownership, you go to jail. So where is that? What is that reality? You should ask people, what is this reality that you're referring to? And what grade of happiness do you have? Real happiness is it can't be subdued. Real spiritual happiness cannot be subdued. Even with the example of Rishabdev, the Supreme Lord, and the Avanti Brahman, they underwent so much torture by others. Sometimes we get offended if somebody says something to us, but they were being tortured, physically tortured, and they were seeing it as, my destiny, no problem. They derived happiness from it, whatever was happening to them. So that's how I would respond.
Thank you, Gurudev.
Hare Krishna. So here's a question. If one is not interested in understanding the science like Jiva or Ishvara, or really understanding Gita, however, enjoy the Krishna Leelas. So is this okay? Or if they are enjoying only the husk, but not the grain, because they don't understand Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they take pleasure in his Leela. So is this still better than nothing? It's a very good question. Thank you for that question. Just like in diet, let us see the example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was immersed. He was in Jagannath Puri, immersed in Krishna Leela. And what did he do? He would go to the temple every day. He would perform his sannyas duties. He would, and even sometimes he would just hear the story of Dhruva Maharaj or Prahlad Maharaj. So he even heard that dozens of times while he was there, and he performed his activities. He protected his sannyas dharma. When the Devi Dasi was singing glories of Jagannath, and Lord Chaitanya became attracted and went running toward her, Govinda stopped him and said, "She's a woman." And he said, "My Govinda, you saved my life." So we don't see that Lord Chaitanya was just enjoying leelas, and he's the topmost devotee. So, it's nice, it's wonderful that people enjoy leelas, but it also opens a door for sahaja and irresponsibility, because the sahaja mentality is just that. Oh, I'm hearing about Krishna, all of his intimate pastimes. But if we don't know how to conduct our lives in such a way, if we don't follow the rules and regulations, we don't hear Gita and understand what Krishna is recommending for us, then we will, it's very probable, very possible. Now, one may be very elevated from a past life and only be absorbed in Krishna Lila. Well, that's very wonderful. But even if you're on that platform, you should prescribe. We don't see any of our acharyas saying, just hear Krishna Lila. Do we see Prabhupada saying that? Do we see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur? On the contrary, we see that both Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and even Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they didn't simply speak leelas. They spoke philosophy to bring people to the platform where when they hear the leela, they will actually have the proper consciousness for not trying to enjoy myself by hearing Krishna's leela, but trying to serve Krishna's leela by hearing it with the proper mentality and the proper consciousness to serve that leela, and to give that leela to others in such a way that it will bring them closer to Krishna. So, but is it better to do that than nothing? Yes, it is better, but it can also create offenses and negligence. If someone, especially if someone's, we find this in India, people just want to hear them. But then, as I just mentioned, in India, practically, or I mentioned that to someone else, practically speaking, the whole understanding of Ram Leela, Krishna Leela it's mythology. They think, oh, it's all very wonderful, beautiful, I love, but it's all mythology. And that's becoming more and more popular, only because our movement, and of course, Gaudiya Math to some degree, and our movement probably to a greater degree, is spreading the truth of Krishna consciousness, is giving Bhagavad Gita to everyone. People who were just hearing Krishna Lila in an offensive way are now hearing it properly. So there's a danger, but of course, it's better than nothing. Another follow-up question. It's usually recommended to read Gita first and then Bhagavatam. However, if one is 90 years old and is interested only in Lila, then reading Bhagavatam is okay rather than Gita? Yes. Of course, if you're 90 years old and you're on your deathbed, you just go to that person and read the Krishna book. No philosophy, no verses, no Sanskrit, just read the pure Krishna book. But I've seen people come to Krishna consciousness, not maybe with 90, but with 90 years old, it will be difficult. Most people, if they come at 90, it's because they're suffering so much that finally something clicks in their brain. But we should encourage them to hear a little Gita. It's much better. And also, when we're hearing Gita, it's not that we don't hear Bhagavatam. Prabhupada said every morning we should hear Bhagavatam, every evening we should hear Bhagavad Gita. It's not, they go on simultaneously, but in the beginning we should put more emphasis in learning Gita. Then we put more emphasis in learning Bhagavatam. And then when we really understand Bhagavatam to some satisfactory degree, then we may concentrate more on Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Nectar Devotion or other Shastras. So any other question before we discontinue? It seems like there's no more questions, comments. Thank you so much for your kind attention. I hope that Sri Damodar blesses all of you and all of us, everyone, that we can enter into his Leela with the proper understanding to arrive at the very conclusions of Satyavata Muni, the conclusion of total absorption in Krishna's Leela, but with real understanding of what's going on here. Otherwise, why do Jiva Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur have, especially in the 10th canto where there's more Leela, they have such elaborate pastimes, such elaborate commentaries, sometimes 4 or 5 pages long, just to make sure we understand everything properly. If it weren't important to understand the philosophy, then why do these acharyas spend so much time and energy on the 10th canto? On the other cantos, the commentary is usually 1 or 2 lines of our acharyas, and Prabhupada puts more commentaries because he's preaching to such a variegated audience. But the point is that that let Lord Damodar bless us with the proper understanding, and Srila Prabhupada through his books and his teachings. So thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Vanchakalpatarupatsindibivachapatanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.